bears a year simply to roadkill. And the bear has to move across all of these different habitats to find food seasonally at different times of the year. Animals inevitably have to cross a road in order to survive. And when we put a wildlife underpass in play, it's important to put it in an intelligent location, one that's going to be used. North of the city of Brooksville, you'll see two wildlife underpasses that don't exactly do their ideal function. One goes from a patch of habitat over to a current mine. This is not a good underpass. You're going from a patch of habitat to a mine where at varying times of the day you're going to see dump trucks, cranes, maybe even dynamite. No animal's going to use this.
Suncoast Project 1 officials claimed they worked closely with the biologists.
We've jumped through every hoop imaginable to get to where we are right now. We've got wildlife crossings all up and down. We've got 8 total wildlife crossings that we've put into this project, and fencing to keep the animals from getting on the road. They're only going to be able to cross at the wildlife crossings. And those are crossings that were established, set up by the different agencies we work with.
The biologists, however, say otherwise.
And in building or the construction of the Suncoast Phase 1, they actually consulted my professor at the University of Kentucky, Dave Mayer. And Dave gave them suggestions where he thought legitimate or sufficient wildlife underpasses should be put in place on the Phase 1 of the Suncoast Toll Road. For some reason, unbeknownst to me, DOT or whoever was involved there pretty much put Dave and the other biologists' opinions off to the side and put these underpasses in what seemed like the most convenient place for them.
The Turnpike District often chose which facts it wanted to believe. The Veterans Expressway, Seminole Parkway, Polk Parkway, and Osceola Parkway were all justified using traffic projections by the same consulting company that were wildly inaccurate. Revenues for the Suncoast Parkway also turned out to be below what was supposedly required by state law to justify building it.
Initially, consultants projected that in the first year it would make $70 million in toll revenue. Through the years, the projections have decreased by $56 million. By law, the parkway is required to show through its feasibility study that in the first 5 years, the roadway will be able to pay at least 50% of its debt service back to its bondholders. According to court records, a financial expert with DOT testified in 1998 that meant the project would not be feasible if toll revenue dropped below the 5-year projection of $138 million, which it does. The most recent projections indicate that the project is miscalculated by almost $37 million. DOT says the excess money will have to come through tolls collected from other Florida turnpikes, or
we would ask the local district, the local DOT district, or the counties, can you make up that shortfall?
As usual, it's taxpayers who have to pay for these convenient mistakes, and current residents who have to sacrifice their backyards and neighborhoods so developers can keep making money bringing in more people. 50 years ago, our economy, population, and lifestyles were very different from what they are today. Back then, the original interstate highway system filled an obvious existing need. It connected America's cities to each other. Now, roads like the Suncoast Parkway are being put into rural areas to create a need. The bond prospectus for the Suncoast describes this plan for potential investors. The impact of land use lag, it says, is greater in the early years of project operation, with development building to or near expected levels over time. It goes on to cheerfully point out how the toll road will get used more and more as congestion on all other roads in the area comes up to expectations. The growth industry, of course, already knows this. Within months of the Suncoast Parkway's opening, they provided a bus tour of the new business opportunities so generously opened up by the toll road. Planning for congestion is almost nobody's idea of progress and improvement. Yet many people who ought to know better still accept this kind of road building as good for our future.
The Sierra Club is fighting progress in hopes of protecting the Bay Area's environment.
The news media often report on the problems of growth, but rarely seem to understand that pushing development at any cost is a big part of those problems.
Now, the Department of Transportation maintains it actually got a bargain by paying $9 million for the property that was valued at $7 million, because they say with damages it would far have exceeded that. However, critics say that's just not true. The comparable properties were selling for less. And the department also maintains it did not choose the site for this road before the public hearings, even though the court records indicate that it did.
Instead of learning from its well-publicized mistakes, the Turnpike District changed its name and seems intent on removing public accountability of any sort.
DOT has declared war on the environment here.
Lawyer Leslie Blackner explains how the laws have been changed.
Environmental feasibility is pretty much whatever the Turnpike District wants it to be, and the Turnpike District has never found a road that is not environmentally feasible. I personally learned a very important and hard lesson during the 2002 legislative session. Many of the Florida Turnpike toll roads built in the last 10, 12 years are not paying for themselves in the time period set forth by the legislature in the Turnpike Authorization Statute. I was hopeful that there would be a demand for accountability and there would be some reform of the Turnpike District. Incredibly, not only has Turnpike not been asked to account for what has happened, the legislature just rewrites the laws to accommodate Turnpike's unlawful behavior. So instead of having a road that must pay for 50% of its cost in the first 5 years of operation, now the Turnpike District has 12 years to pay off the first 50% of the bond indebtedness or the cost of the road, and it has 22 years, not 15 years. It has 22 years to pay off the full cost of the road.
A practically unstoppable, self-governing, and self-financing road-building monster. No wonder critics refer to the newly redesigned Turnpike enterprise as Roadzilla. They make a valid point. If these roads are so unquestionably good for Florida's future, why can't the road builders meet public standards for good business practices and provide reasonable accountability for public debt? Our state and local representatives, all too often, want to have their cake and eat it too. They talk conservation, but when it comes down to taking action, they're still fixated on the old growth machine as the goose that lays golden eggs. Somewhere, we have to start saying enough is enough. Somewhere, we have to start saying that the needs of people who already live here are just as important as the needs of people who want to live here. For all their mistakes, the road builders are right about one thing, though. Roads do make growth happen. But is it the kind of growth, and in the kind of places, to really benefit our communities?
Now I have this mountain next to me, which is the Suncoast, and I can't see my sunset. So if I want to see the sunset, I have to drive maybe a mile further north on my property so that I can appreciate it. And I was aggravated, so I wrote this song, My Sunset. Each day I sat on my front porch so I could see the sunset behind the trees. But now I can't see the sunset anymore, 'cause the Suncoast Parkway popped up next door. Now I have to drive, drive, drive north on my old country road so that I can see that sunset behind the trees.